Hello again. So today I'm going to show you how I cook spaghetti squash. This is a spaghetti squash. It's a little smaller than ones that I normally have had in the past, but I think that's because spaghetti squash is a fall and winter vegetable. This is what it looks like. And on the label it should say spaghetti squash. Don't get this confused with an acorn squash or a butternut squash. Then you have to make butternut or acorn squash soup, which is equally delicious, but if you want spaghetti and you're on the paleo primal diet, this is your best friend. The trickiest part about making a spaghetti squash is cracking it open because it's got a very, very thick exterior. But if you have a good knife and a strong arm, it's easy. So let's begin. Step number 1. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Step number 2. Oh! That could have been bad. Cutting your spaghetti squash open. This is the tricky part. I just kind of get in there and stick my knife around and do what I have to do. So, this is how I do it. I stick my knife right in the middle. And then I kind of curve it downwards and around. Whoa. Be careful not to stab yourself. There you go. All right, it's okay if you have not equal parts because you're just gonna scoop it out anyway. All right, here's the inside of your spaghetti squash. Our next step is to scoop out all of the seeds. So just take your spoon and dig in like that. Clean as a whistle. Now you're gonna get a baking sheet and cover it with parchment paper. Sometimes also called baking paper. This is the parchment paper. Now, I recommend getting an olive oil sprayer, but any sort of spray like that. You could even kind of just take olive oil in your palm of your hand and coat the baking sheet with it. Some really good friends of ours bought this for us before we moved to California. So take it and just spray it. It would be good if you remember to take the sticker off. Now you're going to spray the face of it and lay it face side down on your baking sheet. Repeat. Face side down, like so. The oven has now preheated, so very, very carefully put your spaghetti squash in the oven. Now we're gonna let it bake for an hour. Oftentimes I come home from work and I'm way too tired to sit and bake a spaghetti squash for an hour, wait for it to cool, and then eat it. That is a very long process when you've been working all day. So what I do on the weekends is I will make a bunch of spaghetti squash and I will just put it in a plastic container and stick it in the fridge for whenever I need it next. I've had spaghetti squash sit in the fridge for 2 weeks before and it's been perfectly fine. Good thing about spaghetti squash, it's so versatile. You don't have to do like a spaghetti bolognese sauce. You can do like an herb olive oil spaghetti squash mix and it's still so good. It doesn't taste exactly like spaghetti noodles, obviously, but it is an excellent replacement and I actually prefer to eat the spaghetti squash than spaghetti noodles themselves because I don't feel just disgusting afterwards. I don't feel uncomfortably full. I feel very satisfied and it's great. Alright, so my spaghetti squash is done. A good way to check and see if spaghetti squash is ready is by sticking a knife in it. If it goes in easily, then it's done. Okay, so this is what it looks like whenever you put your knife in it. See how easy that goes in there? Okay, so now we're just gonna let them cool very, very carefully. Turn the squash over We're gonna let that cool, and while it's cooling, then I'm going to show you how I make a spaghetti bolognese sauce. The recipe that I'm using comes from my Donna Hay cookbook. It is not a paleo cookbook, but she still has some things that could be considered paleo, such as this bolognese sauce. Alright, so here are our ingredients. So we're using 2 chopped onions, 2 cloves of garlic minced. We have 2 tins of tomatoes, salt, about, I don't know, 1/8 cup of parsley. You could use fresh or dried. I just happen to have dried. I didn't have any fresh around. Then we are using ground beef, and this is grass-fed ground beef. I only ever use grass-fed beef because the nutritional benefits far outweigh those of grain-fed beef, and I like the taste better. And then we're also using a cup of beef broth. Okay, so put a large saucepan on high heat on your stove. And you're gonna wanna add your olive oil. I eyeball it. Technically you're supposed to use 2 tablespoons, but whatever. Ooh. Go olive oil. Okay, so once your olive oil is heated up in your pan, it's time to add your onions and garlic. So just scoop them up and put them in the pan. We're gonna let that saute for about 3 minutes or so until the onions are softened. So as you can see, the onions are starting to develop a nice kind of brown color. They're not quite there yet, but they're getting there. Love the sound of onions sizzling in a pan. So I realized that the recipe calls for 2 pounds of ground beef and I only have 1. So I'm just gonna go ahead with everything and just go like I have 2 pounds of meat. Brown, my pretties, brown. Your onions are ready. So what we're gonna do now that our onions are ready, we are going to put our ground beef in the pot and brown it. All right, see how the meat is starting to brown around the edges? We want it all the way through. And it's browned. I know it kind of does look pink here in the video, but that's just because I have weird lighting in my kitchen. Okay, so now I'm gonna add the stock. Go stocky, go stocky. And 1 of the tins of tomato. Oh, 2 tins of tomato. Again, you can use whatever spaghetti sauce recipe you have. That's fine too. And if you're really, really, really lazy, you can always go to the store and get a tin of spaghetti sauce, but just make sure that it doesn't have any added sugar or flours in it. I don't know why it would have flour, but you never know. So we're just gonna let this simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. While our tomato sauce, our bolognese sauce, is simmering, I gave our lovely little spaghetti squash a little check, and they're cool enough to handle. To make the noodles, all you're gonna need is your squash, a bowl, and a fork. So take the fork, and you're just gonna grate it through the squash. Great. Whoa. Grate it. And do you see all the lovely little noodles that are coming out of it? So good. Now, my poor little squash, because it was so little, I should not have kept it in the oven for a full hour. I should have maybe done it for 45 minutes or so. So my noodles are a little bit mushier than what I would like, but still edible. Okay, and that's it for your noodles. Seriously, so easy. I think even if you're not cooking paleo, if you're just starting out cooking whatever, it's very important not to let yourself get stressed out and overwhelmed. Things go wrong all the time. You spill stuff, you burn stuff, you don't measure correctly, and it's okay, I promise. It may not turn out exactly how you wanted it, but it's still good. It's still edible. Don't overthink cooking. It's really not that hard. So at this point, you're gonna wanna add some salt to your taste. I don't know, I don't ever measure out my salt. I just kind of throw it all in there until I feel like it tastes good. Okay, so I have some Italian seasoning here. That way. Okay, and in it is oregano, marjoram, thyme, basil, rosemary, and sage. So I'm just gonna shake a ton of it in there. Actually, I'll probably just pour it in there. Again, it's to your liking how much spice you want in your sauce. I like a lot of spice. So my tomato sauce is a little bit runny because, again, I was meant to use 2 pounds instead of 1. And that's okay. I'm still gonna eat it. Then I'm gonna add my parsley. That smells good. All right, so here's the finished spaghetti sauce. Like I said, it's a bit more runny than what I would like. You can either leave it to simmer for a little bit longer to get some of that liquid out, or you can just use a slotted spoon to scoop it. All right, so give it a taste, see if you like it. Blow on it first because you don't want to burn your mouth. That's really good. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in a Tupperware because I'm saving this for my lunch tomorrow. And truthfully, I never mind if I have more sauce than I have the noodles, because the sauce is the good part anyway. It's where it has all the protein and all the flavor. Sometimes I like to get a little bit of feta cheese and sprinkle it on top. That's okay in my book. It may not be okay in yours. That's fine. There we go. Ha-ha. Easy peasy. Now you can make spaghetti squash on your own. Alright, so that's it for this episode. Stay tuned because I will be posting more videos in the upcoming weeks. Don't forget to subscribe and share to all your friends.